got the far left here and the far right, and what is the difference between them? For example, Stalin's Russia to Hitler's Germany, just as an example, but there's many more examples. So we're just going to go through the actual characteristics of the far left and the far right. And first of all, you got to realize that they're both collectivists. That means that you have a collectivist group of people in the government where basically they're responsible for practically everything. Giving the population jobs, food, money, water, whatever. They've got basically control. They've got massive control over basically all these resources, and they talk about the Borg mind and stuff like that, like out of, was it Star Trek or something? Well, the far left people talk about that, but in fact, it's the same for the far right people as well. If you look at it, they just were of one mind to dominate the population of their country and beyond, which is a totalitarian dictatorship. Okay, in both cases, this is the case. And when you look at some of the protests that are going on in Europe just now, and they're saying it's far right, no, because there's no totalitarian leader like Hitler. There's just nobody leading it in any country at the moment. There's protesters, there's people who are standing up against injustices and stuff like that, but there's no actual political party that are saying, right, okay, follow us. Not only will we kick out people who shouldn't be in the country, which of course the far right did and the far left did, and the leftists got to realise that. They also did exactly the same thing. There's many groups of people that actually left Russia and, different far left countries. They just don't want certain people in them, and they did the same in the far right as well. Yep. So moving on. The far right is a mixed economy with state control, and the far left is a command economy with state ownership. And that's basically pretty much 100% complete control of everything. The mixed economy is reliant on big business or big pharma, whatever you want to call it. The big businesses are very much part of a far right socialist dictatorship, whereas the far left is just basically the government just run absolutely everything. They're not dependent on any big companies. They just do everything themselves. And even though Russia isn't far left still, they still have that mentality that they don't have any domineering companies, like, for example, in Russia or possibly in China. There's a lot of gangsters in China. There's a lot of, there is a lot of big companies there. But the government still control everything. Then we got suppressed individual rights, which is the same in both sides, because they expect people to follow on to the agenda of the collective leadership. Heavy censorship and propaganda, the same on both sides. What we have is, pictures of the dictator, same in Nazi Germany, same as in Stalinist Russia. You might get even more in a leftist dictatorship. Strong personality cults around Stalin, personality cult around Hitler, of course. Had his little right-hand salute in Stalin. They did what they did, their little funny little marches they did. And, well, the West hasn't got around to doing those funny little marches just yet. But, well, next one is strong personality cults. Promoted internationalism, equality. Again, this is sort of a controlled view of different religions and races and so on, that you're sort of allowed to do certain things, and you sort of have limited rights kind of thing to do any of that. Mostly it's just worshipping the state. And then we have, the far right is anti-Semitic Aryan supremacy. Next one we have focused on spreading communism. And by the way, there's actually a lot of far right countries in countries like Africa. A lot of people don't realize that, but they've actually kicked a lot of African countries have kicked out all the white people, just like Germany kicked out sort of black people and whatever. African countries have kicked out many white people. So there's actually far right dictatorships within Africa at the moment. Not talking about South Africa. There's still white people there. They've not been kicked out, though they've been attacked. And the next one is focused on spreading communism and expansionist, materialistic, far right. Yeah. And then the last one we have here is responsible for millions of deaths, infamous for the Holocaust, and they're responsible for millions of deaths as well. And so the little commentary we have at the bottom here, when an AI bot was asked to compare the politics of Stalin, Hitler, and Hayek, which will look at the real far right, which is hidden, which has not really been. What we have here is a fake far right, but they call it far right, but it's really not. It's really pretty much aligns with leftism, which is really strange. It's just basically a way of controlling far right controlled opposition. That's basically what they're doing. And it produced the above table. Infamous for the Holocaust, was surprising how the AI bot decided to phrase that entry. So this table was written by an AI bot, and it is pretty accurate, by the way. You can see from the above comparison that Thatcher aimed to be more like Hayek column, whilst I'd argue the American president at that time as well. Whilst the past century, every other government in Britain has aimed to be more like Stalin, Hitler columns. As Hayek pointed out, since neither Labour, Liberals or colonialists tried to prevent socialism, they all get pulled in the same direction of Stalin and Hitler. They use a fantasy far right to conceal their racist genocide of indigenous people of Britain. So in this case, the people who are targeted in this far left or even far right dictatorship is a totalitarian dictatorship. And let me just say that the rulers aren't really the government. They're just the ones that carry out the wishes of the elite. So, far right, the true far right is individualist. This is speaking about the economy. There's very limited government control in the economy. You get a wage packet, you work, you get paid for whatever that job is, and there's absolutely no intervention by the government. There's no wage tax or whatever, all these taxes just now that you see in a socialist country. In a far right individualist country, there's no interference at all by the government. There's limited government and free markets. Okay, so the government is limited, in other words, and there's free markets. There's free trade happening without the government interfering with what's going on. It's called free market capitalism. Minimize state intervention, emphasize individual freedom, protects free speech. No cult of personality, because basically you got individualism, so you're not worshipping the state or worshipping a president or a king or a queen or whatever. Individual rights regardless of race, non-intervention and free trade, influential in economics and libertarian thought. So if even the gospel says where the gospel is being preached, there is liberty. So again, in these far left or right dictatorships, the gospel, the Christians were very limited in actually their preaching of the Word of God, and we're seeing that today. We're seeing that in the West, that people are getting more and more against the preaching of the Word of God. So that means that we're all becoming far left, which is the same pretty much as the far right agenda, except arguably it's far more destructive. I think if you look at all the communist governments through the ages, they're the ones that have killed more of their own people than anybody else, even though the far right has killed their own people, but as in a racist way. But they've also went out and actually tried to dominate other countries, which in the real far right, it's inward looking. They're not really worried about what's happening outside other nations. They don't know. They don't want to start wars. They just want to grow the economy in their own country for people to have liberty and freedom, free speech, and just basically freedom to pursue their dreams and happiness, which is the great American dream. And of course, we're thankful for God for putting Donald Trump in the White House, and Donald's thankful to God that he's in the White House, and it seems that we'll have hopefully a few more years left of freedom, before the one world government is started, which is spoken of in the Bible.